July 26, 1945, USS Indianapolis completes the most important mission of World War II, delivering the uranium core for the Hiroshima bomb. 4 days later, 2 torpedoes rip through the hull. The ship sinks in 12 minutes. 900 men hit the water. No distress signal. No rescue. 4 days with no food, no water, and sharks circling below. By the time help arrives, only 316 survive. This is the story of the ship that ended the war and the 879 men who paid the price for a mission they never knew they'd completed. The top secret cargo. Let me show you what was actually loaded onto USS Indianapolis on July 15, 1945. At Hunters Point Naval Shipyard in San Francisco, Army trucks pulled alongside the heavy cruiser. Sailors watched as a large wooden crate was loaded into the port hangar. A lead-lined steel cylinder was welded into Captain Charles McVeigh's cabin and bolted to the floor. No explanations, no paperwork beyond a signature confirming receipt. Inside that cylinder, 85 pounds of enriched uranium-235, the projectile core for Little Boy. 2 men in civilian clothes boarded with the cargo. Major Robert Furman and Dr. James Nolan, both from the Manhattan Project, traveling incognito. Nolan's job was to monitor the uranium's radioactivity. He spent most of the voyage seasick, which gave him an excuse to check the container every few hours. The Indianapolis crew had no idea what they were carrying. Captain McVeigh knew it was critical to the war effort. That's it. The ship left San Francisco on July 16th, the same day the Trinity test proved the atomic bomb worked in the New Mexico desert. Racing across the Pacific at maximum speed, Indianapolis set a record. San Francisco to Pearl Harbor in just under 5 days. From there to Tinian Island in the Marianas, where the Enola Gay was already waiting. July 26th. Mission complete. The uranium was unloaded at Tinian. The wooden crate contained the rest of Little Boy's gun assembly mechanism. Everything needed for the first combat atomic bomb, delivered faster than any ship had ever made the crossing. The crew still didn't know what they transported. They wouldn't find out until August 6th, when they were already dead or dying in the ocean. The sinking. After dropping cargo at Tinian, Indianapolis made a brief stop at Guam, then received orders for Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. Routine training exercises. The ship would join Task Force 95.7, then return to being Admiral Spruance's flagship. Captain McVeigh requested a destroyer escort, standard procedure for a heavy cruiser in enemy waters. Request denied. The route to Leyte was considered low risk. What McVeigh wasn't told, 4 days earlier, the destroyer escort, USS Underhill, had been sunk by a Japanese submarine a few hundred miles north. Naval intelligence had decoded Japanese transmissions, showing that submarine 158, commanded by Mochitsura Hashimoto, was operating directly along the route Indianapolis would take. The intelligence existed. It was classified. McVeigh never received the warning. July 29th, just before midnight. Heavy overcast, poor visibility. McVeigh ordered the crew to stop zigzagging, the evasive maneuver designed to avoid submarine attacks. In those conditions, zigzagging was discretionary. You couldn't see threats anyway. He went to his cabin. At 12:14 a.m. on July 30th, 2 torpedoes from I-58 struck Indianapolis on the starboard side. The first torpedo blew the boat clean off. The second hit amidships, igniting fuel tanks and triggering a massive explosion. Power failed instantly. No way to send a proper distress signal. The ship listed hard to starboard, then began sinking by the bow. 12 minutes. That's how long Indianapolis stayed afloat. Captain McVeigh gave the order to abandon ship. Many sailors never heard it over the explosions and rushing water. About 300 men went down with the ship, trapped below decks or killed in the initial blast. 900 made it into the water. None of them were prepared for what came next. 4 days in hell. Here's what 900 men faced in the Philippine Sea with no rescue in sight, no lifeboats. Indianapolis sank too fast for an organized evacuation. Men clung to debris, life rafts, and floating nets. Many had no life jackets. Some were badly burned from the explosions. Others had broken bones or shrapnel wounds. The sun rose on July 30th. Men realized how far from land they were. The horizon stretched empty in every direction. Oil slicks covered the surface. Salt water burned their eyes and throats. By the second day, dehydration set in. Men started drinking seawater. Salt poisoning causes hallucinations. Sailors began seeing mirages, islands, ships, hotels just below the surface. Some swam down to imaginary rescue vessels and never came back up. Then there were the sharks. Oceanic white-tip sharks, drawn by the noise of the sinking, the blood in the water, and the thrashing of injured men. The Naval History and Heritage Command's records show that sharks initially fed on the dead, bodies floating in clusters. But as the days wore on and the living grew weaker, the sharks became less selective. Survivors reported being bumped, circled, watching shipmates pulled under in a thrashing spray of blood. Men formed defensive circles, kicking at sharks, but exhaustion made it nearly impossible to keep fighting. How many died from shark attacks? Estimates range from dozens to over 150. Most died from dehydration, exposure, and salt poisoning, but the sharks made it exponentially worse, turning an already desperate situation into psychological torture. By the fourth day, August 2nd, fewer than 400 men remained conscious. And here's the worst part, no one was looking for them, the unforgivable delay. USS Indianapolis was due at Leyte Gulf on July 31st. She didn't arrive. No one reported her missing. 3 shore stations received distress signals the night of the sinking. One commander was drunk and ignored it. Another had ordered his men not to disturb him. The third assumed it was a Japanese trap. No action taken, no search initiated. On August 2nd, a Navy patrol plane on routine anti-submarine patrol spotted an oil slick. Then the pilot, Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn, saw men in the water. He radioed for help. Lieutenant Commander Robert Adrian Marks arrived in a PBY Catalina seaplane, saw sharks attacking survivors, and made an unauthorized open ocean landing, a dangerous maneuver that could have destroyed his aircraft. Marks pulled 56 men from the water. A small fleet of ships converged on the site. USS Cecil J. Doyle, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Graham Claytor, arrived after midnight on August 3rd and did something remarkable. He aimed his searchlight at the clouds, risking submarine attack, so the men still in the water could see that rescue had arrived. Final count, 316 survivors out of 1,196 crew, 879 dead. The greatest single loss of life from a naval vessel in U.S. history. The scapegoat. Captain Charles McVeigh survived. He was one of the last men pulled from the water. 3 months later, the Navy court-martialed him. The charge, hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag. Never mind that McVeigh had requested a destroyer escort and been denied. Never mind that he wasn't warned about Japanese submarines in the area, despite naval intelligence knowing I-58 was there. Never mind that visibility was terrible. And zigzagging was discretionary under those conditions. The trial included testimony from Mochitsura Hashimoto, the Japanese submarine commander who sank Indianapolis. In an unprecedented move, the U.S. Navy brought the enemy officer to Washington to testify. Hashimoto stated clearly that zigzagging would not have prevented the attack. Once he had Indianapolis in his sights, the torpedoes would have hit regardless. McVeigh was convicted anyway, the only U.S. Navy captain ever court-martialed for losing a ship to enemy action in wartime. Admiral Chester Nimitz later set aside the sentence and restored McVeigh to active duty. He retired in 1949 as a rear admiral, but the conviction stood, and the families of the dead knew his name. For the next 19 years, McVeigh received hate mail, Christmas cards reading, "Merry Christmas. Our family's holiday would be a lot merrier if you hadn't killed my son." On November 6, 1968, McVeigh walked onto his front porch in Litchfield, Connecticut, and shot himself with a revolver. He was found holding a toy sailor his father had given him as a boy for luck. 70 years old, haunted by 879 ghosts and a conviction that should never have happened. The 6th grader who changed history. In 1996, 11-year-old Hunter Scott sat down to watch Jaws with his father. There's a scene where Quint, played by Robert Shaw, described surviving the Indianapolis sinking. Scott was fascinated. For his school's National History Day project, he decided to research the story. He interviewed nearly 150 Indianapolis survivors. He reviewed 800 declassified documents, and he discovered something that changed everything. The Navy had known about I-58's position before Indianapolis sailed. The intelligence had been withheld from McVeigh and suppressed during his court-martial. Scott testified before Congress in 1999. His research, combined with decades of advocacy by Indianapolis survivors, led to a congressional resolution in October 2000. President Bill Clinton signed it. Captain Charles McVeigh III was officially exonerated. Too late for McVeigh to know, but his name was finally cleared. Hunter Scott is now a naval officer, currently serving at the Pentagon. The 6th grader who proved the Navy wrong became part of the institution he helped reform. The USS Indianapolis delivered the weapon that ended World War II and was abandoned to die in the same ocean. 879 men paid the price for a mission so secret that even their deaths were ignored. Captain McVeigh carried the guilt for 23 years until a 6th grader proved what survivors had known all along. He was just a scapegoat. In 2017, the wreckage was found 18,000 feet below the surface. It remains a war grave, untouched. If this story got you, hit that like button and subscribe for more history the textbooks left out. Drop a comment. Should Captain McVeigh have been court-martialed? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.